Firebrand wanted to tell us the story of Catherine Parr, a queen who survived Henry VIII and helped fan the flames of Protestantism in England. But honestly, it mostly fanned the flames of frustration for anyone who knows their Tudor history. Let's talk about what was true, what was pure invention, and everything in between in today's video. Welcome back to Female Tales. I'm Yulia, and together on this channel, we explore the stories of remarkable women from history. If history speaks to you, like the video, join our community, and let's head straight into the depths of the past. Catherine Parr holds a special place in my heart among all of Henry VIII's wives, a woman who, unfortunately, often ends up in the shadow of Anne Boleyn or Catherine of Aragon. But in my opinion, she was ahead of her time. So, naturally, I couldn't ignore Firebrand, a film that set out to tell her story. The film is actually based on Elizabeth Fremantle's novel, Queen's Gambit. And while the book gives us a much broader view of Catherine's life, starting from the death of her second husband and even covering events after Henry's death, the movie narrows it all down to a much shorter time frame. It focuses on the period from her regency up to Henry's death, or rather, in this version, his murder. Let me start with what I actually loved about Firebrand, the casting and the costumes. Just look at how perfectly the actors were chosen. One of the highlights for me was Jude Law's performance. He did a fantastic job showing Henry as an aging, increasingly frail monarch, both physically and emotionally. And look at the actress who played Elizabeth. She looks so much like the real Elizabeth, even down to that signature little bump on her nose. And Thomas Seymour? I mean, he looks exactly like his portrait. It's uncanny. As for Alicia Vikander as Catherine, I liked her too. She's about the right age, early 30s, and with the same red hair we see in Catherine's portraits. And, like I said earlier, I really liked the costumes. In so many Tudor films, we get this strange, half-modern fashion, almost like they just grabbed some gowns from the evening wear section. But here, the costumes actually hit the mark. And this costume in particular, the one lifted straight from Catherine's most iconic portrait, made me squeal with joy. It was just so satisfying to finally see it come to life on screen. But that's where the praise ends. Time to take off the mask and get into the real drama behind this show. The film opens with Catherine Parr secretly meeting Anne Askew, a Protestant preacher, during Henry's absence from court. Anne is shown as boldly criticising the king and practically calling for revolution.
Revolution is upon us!
The movie portrays the two women as long-time close friends and religious allies. Catherine even gives Anne a piece of her jewellery to help fund her campaign, and that very piece becomes a key element in the plot against the Queen later on. Of course, this is pure fiction invented by the screenwriters. In reality, Catherine and Anne never met. Anne was 5 years younger and moved in completely different circles. Yes, they may have shared similar religious views, but Catherine would never have openly sponsored someone like Anne. It would have been far too risky. Honestly, I'm a little disappointed the film didn't explore Anne's story further, because later on we only hear about her fate through Catherine, who tells Henry that Anne's death is on his conscience. And to me, Anne Askew is one of the most fascinating women of that era. I'd love to see a film focused entirely on her and her tragic, heroic story. She was a poet and a true lover of books, and it was through reading that she absorbed the ideas of Protestantism. She tried to divorce her husband because he didn't share her religious beliefs. He kicked her out, and she began to preach. She was arrested multiple times for spreading heresy, but during her final arrest, she was subjected to horrific torture in the Tower of London, something that almost never happened to women at the time. The authorities hoped she would confess and implicate the Queen and her circle, but she didn't. She stayed silent. Anne was so badly tortured she had to be carried to her execution, unable to walk. She was burned at the stake at just 25 years old. Now, that's a true firebrand, and in my opinion, she deserved way more screen time than the film gave her. Then we see Catherine Parr in a rather private moment with Thomas Seymour, my least favourite person in the entire history of the Tudors. But that's another story. What the film conveniently ignores is that Thomas wasn't even on English soil at that point. Right after Henry set his sights on Catherine Parr, Thomas was sent abroad, appointed ambassador to the court of the Habsburgs in Brussels. And during the very summer of 1543, when the film is set, he was busy fighting in the war against France. So, no. He definitely couldn't have been sneaking around court, secretly flirting with Catherine. In reality, Thomas only returned to England shortly before Henry's death. And as many of you know, he later became Catherine's fourth husband. But in the film, we get a completely fictional subplot where Henry becomes wildly jealous of Catherine and Thomas. At one point, he even accuses her of carrying another man's child. And yes, you heard that right. The movie actually invents a storyline where Catherine is pregnant, and Henry beats her so badly that she loses the baby. To be honest, the nature of Henry's sexual relationship with Catherine Parr is about as well researched as the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Some historians believe that, considering the king's physical condition at the time, he could barely walk and weighed over 130 kilograms. It's hard to imagine him having the stamina for something as physically demanding as sex. That said, we do have some curious court records. For example, Catherine Parr was said to take milk baths to keep her skin soft, and the day after her wedding, she allegedly ordered fine perfumes for her bedchamber at Hampton Court. That seems to suggest she was making an effort to keep her body and her bedroom as appealing as possible. So, what do you think? Was there anything going on or not? But regardless, one thing is certain. Catherine Parr was never pregnant by Henry VIII. If she had been, we would definitely know about it. After all, we know about the miscarriages of both Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn. Do you really think news of a royal pregnancy this late in Henry's life would have gone unrecorded? Please. Henry would have had town criers announcing it from every corner of the country, that at over 50, he still had it in him to produce an heir. And while he was undoubtedly mentally unstable, prone to rage, and physically deteriorating, the idea that he would physically assault a pregnant wife is not convincing. On the contrary, he would have treated her like a sacred crystal vase. You remember how obsessed he was with heirs. He would have done anything for another son. And finally, there's zero evidence anywhere that he ever physically abused her. There's another curious scene in the film where Henry is shown flirting with a young and pretty girl named Agnes Howard. Now, I personally found this rather amusing because, come on, after what happened with his fifth wife, Catherine Howard, it's pretty safe to assume that Henry would have stayed far, far away from any woman named Howard for the rest of his life. But did you know that the aging Henry actually did consider a seventh marriage? Yes, really. When Catherine Parr started to get on his nerves with her persistence in religious debates, his attention supposedly shifted to Catherine Willoughby, the widow of his close friend, Charles Brandon. At court, rumours quickly spread that she might become his seventh queen. Here's a quote from a contemporary letter written in February 1546 by someone who was actually there. "I hesitate to report there are rumours of a new queen. Madame Suffolk is much talked about and is in great favour." Just imagine, what if Henry had ended up executing not just 2 but 3 of his wives? In the film, when the whole story with the necklace finally comes to light, and it's Thomas Seymour who hands it over, essentially setting Catherine up, she's arrested by the guards and thrown into a dungeon-like cell. Of course, in real life she was never locked up like a prisoner in Azkaban. Henry did sign a warrant for her arrest, that part is true, but his own royal physician warned Catherine in advance, and that's when she made her brilliant move. The Queen immediately took to her bed and proclaimed she was terribly ill. Henry soon arrived at her bedside, where she asked if he was angry with her. Later, she told him she had only argued with him to learn from him and to distract him from his pain. She played the role of the silly poor woman and praised Henry as her only anchor, supreme head and governor here on earth, next to God. And just like that, the next day when the guards arrived to arrest her, Henry flipped the script. "Knave, arrant knave, beast and fool!" he shouted at the captain leading the arrest. And of course, in typical Henry fashion, he started showering her with gifts to make peace. That's how Catherine survived, a deadly chess game played at the highest level. And by the way, even if things had gone further, it's highly unlikely she would have been sitting in some cold dungeon behind iron bars, Let's remember, queens imprisoned in the Tower were held in royal apartments, not shoved into cages. And now, the grand finale. The biggest invention of the entire film. We see Catherine being led away, fully believing she's about to be executed. But, surprise, she's brought not to the scaffold, but to the deathbed of Henry himself. There, the king tearfully confesses that he missed her and still loves her. And what does Catherine do in response? She strangles him. Yes, she strangles Henry VIII. First of all, let's be realistic. How is a petite woman supposed to strangle a 130-kilogram man who could barely move, but still had the size and strength of a literal warhorse? And secondly, Catherine wasn't even with him when he died. Henry VIII died on the night of the 28th of January 1547. In the weeks leading up to his death, he was putting his affairs in order and deliberately kept his distance from Catherine. They didn't even spend Christmas or New Year together that year, although they did exchange letters. She also played no formal role in his funeral and only watched the ceremony from the gallery of the chapel. So no, Catherine Parr absolutely did not murder Henry VIII with her bare hands. Although, let's be honest, somewhere deep inside, she probably wanted to. So, final thoughts on Firebrand. I did like that the film brought some attention to Catherine Parr, a queen who's often reduced to being just Henry's nurse wife, quietly surviving while the rest caused drama. It's always good to see her get a bit of spotlight. But personally, I don't think the film truly captured who she was. Her own books are barely mentioned, and for most of the runtime, she's just quietly enduring humiliation and waiting for her husband to die. Where is the Catherine, who charmed ambassadors, who loved dancing, who was a trendsetter at court? In the end, I just didn't feel like she was the one who lit the fire of Protestantism, or that she had much power at all. It didn't really feel like she changed anything in a meaningful way. But what do you think of this version of Catherine Parr? And if you have more great historical films we should watch and talk about together, drop your suggestions in the comments. See you in the next video.